Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, and welcome to the first ever Brum Tech Tapas. It's so good to see that there's been loads of people are watching on YouTube, and especially a warm welcome watching a online event as the pandemic continues to drive us all stir crazy. I'm your host for tonight. My name is Jim Second, developer advocate at Jump24. And if you want to know a little bit more about Jump24, I've got some a little bit of an intro for you. So I'm going to be comparing. Thank you very much. So Jump24, just a quick bit about us. Who are we? At Jump24, we're a software studio. This is called Brum Tech Tapas, after all. So we're a full stack software studio based in the Jewellery Quarter, and we have a range of clients that we work with, from startups and scale-ups up to full enterprise and international enterprise, a range of clients, right? And for anyone tech related, because there will be some tech related people in the audience, but we'll get to that. We code all of our stuff in Laravel. We're a Laravel partner, and we ship our front ends in React.js. Don't worry if any of that means absolutely nothing to you. We'll get to that. If you want to check out a little bit more about us, there's our website, jump24.co.uk, and there is us on the Bird website. At Jump24, so have a look. We have a blog. You can look at our engineering stuff, and yeah, we do regular tweets about things that we find interesting. So that's who we are. So we created Brum Tech Tapas, but more importantly, really, who are you? That's not supposed to be as aggressive as it sounds, but what I really mean is who is this aimed at? Because this is quite an important question, because you'll see we have an absolutely amazing diverse lineup tonight of people from different areas and different sectors. So first things first, the chances are if you're watching tonight, you are probably from one of these amazing places, with commiserations to the city of Wolverhampton, who don't have a flag for some reason, but maybe they should have a competition. But yes, the chances are you're from there. This event is for people in the West Midlands region, or the Midlands region, and contains speakers that are from here as well. And in terms of profiling what we're looking for, in terms of our audience, we're interested in these things. So art. Birmingham is an art city. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And there's a few slides where I'll explain that. Urban planning and architecture, since the Highbury Initiative, I think it was, in 1988, and then the Big City Plan that came out in 1998. Birmingham has had a reputation to shed of the concrete jungle, and it's from these schemes that gradually the city has been reinventing itself, something that it does extremely well. But because of that, there are things like, and I'll get onto community projects in a minute, things like Port Loop and Smithfield. These are some of the largest scaled multi-use sites in Europe, really. So there are big things happening within the architectural community and with urban space and planning, to try and maybe shed Birmingham's reputation as motor city as well, which it clearly probably needs to change. Music. Music is an interesting one because unlike, say, a fairly noisy large city up north, Birmingham has a very, very rich musical history, but it's kind of been lost because we don't shout about it, and I'll get onto that in a second. But the thing is that unlike niche scenes, like baggy or trip hop, or like a good example is Yorkshire Beeps and Squeaks, which is a very, very small bit of Sheffield's music history around the early 90s. Birmingham's history is just completely vast and diverse, and so because of that, I don't think that it really gets as much attention as it deserves. Literature, Birmingham itself is I mean, the things that spring to mind when it comes to literature in modern times, David Lodge at the University of Birmingham, but also things like classically people trot out some W.H. Auden and the Auden Group, but there's been a lot of literary figures, which is not surprising given the fact we have 5 universities 6 universities. I can't remember if Newman was the 5th or the 6th. Food, probably not that much of a surprise to a lot of people that are watching, but Birmingham has become a food city, really. And there's a mixture of reasons. My thinking probably behind that is when University College Birmingham opened up the College of Food and Tourism, I think it was. And suddenly, that was like in the late 80s. And off the back of that, we've had 6 Michelin stars now, if you count Peel's at Hampton, which is absolutely astonishing. And our street food scene is obviously absolutely second to none, and has London a little bit jealous. So why aren't we shouting about that more? Community projects, with a lot of the things that I've been talking about, the planning and architecture, community projects are there's a lot of very cool things happening that might not necessarily be shouted about or given a platform, and we'll get onto that's kind of what Brum Tech Tapas is all about. And finally, tech, because there will be some tech in there, but the content of the tech will be slightly different from the grassroots meetups and things that run in the city. They'll be less technical, because we have other things for that. We have Brum JavaScript and we have Fusion and things like that for deep tech. Whereas we're more interested in the stories behind things that motivate people. So that's what we think our audience kind of look like. So why did we create it? This is I feel it's kind of important as a sort of our first event to actually say why we created it. And I'm going to give you an example. This is an example of why we created Brum Tech Tapas. Oh, good, my cat is here to meow and get in the way. This is the Polish Centre, and the Polish Centre at Millennial House, and it was built in 1962 by expats. In a style of architecture, the brutalist style of architecture, which has basically dominated all of Birmingham's skyline, with people like John Maiden creating vast sort of behemoths like the Central Library and things like that. It's in a half-derelict patch of land in Digbeth, just near where the HS2 site is, as you go past Moore Street and then underneath the Gonna get my cat. Out you go. In tonight's rehearsal, I did not expect to do that. So it houses in this derelict building, it houses the Birmingham Polish community, right? So there's the community choir, there's the scout groups in Polish, things like that. And on the ground level, it has a restaurant. And I didn't know this until recently. Jay Rayner went to this restaurant I think he was reviewing for the Guardian or the Observer, I can't remember. And he gave it an absolutely rave review and said it was the best Polish restaurant that he'd ever been to. And the review is absolutely astonishing. He's like, and also in terms of the value for money and everything. And this really encapsulates what Brum Tech Tapas is really about, is that we do things in this city largely completely in silos. And we don't necessarily need to shout about things more to give to the external world, but especially to the rest of the UK, where we have a lot of reputation, where everyone goes sneers at it. We don't necessarily need to do shout about it too much to bring people in. We need to shout about it amongst ourselves. This is something that's been created for the region of the West Midlands by people in the West Midlands. That's a kind of a summary of what this is about. So created by the pub ramblings of these two gentlemen. On the left is Stuart Langridge of Cryogenics, and on the right is our director Daniel Nunes. They conceived this as a new event, which is for the community, about the community, and transcends out of our world in tech and into people with a passion doing things in their industry or their sector, be it in the arts or in urban planning, etc. So the number one question: why Brum Tech Tapas if there's art and literature, etc. And there is a reason for that. First of all, Brum Tech. We are part of the Birmingham tech ecosystem. So from left to right, we're part of the Laravel ecosystem worldwide, but also we're members of Fusion. I also co-run Fusion with my team. I created the Birmingham PHP user group. We have friends in Silicon Canal. We mentor at School of Code, and we have friends at Birmingham Tech who help promote us. We're part of the tech ecosystem, but also coming outside that, Tapas. Bite-sized culture is how we're looking at it, and that's what you'll see from our speakers, our fantastic speakers tonight. So an example of sort of bites of small culture within the region. On the far left is the famous Balti, the Birmingham Balti Company, who make the official Balti dishes, and let me tell you, after 11 years in London, nobody outside of this region can do a Balti. They pretend they can, and they just get it wrong, and it's really embarrassing. And then next on the right, you've got the Pre-Raphaelites. The Pre-Raphaelites Brotherhood, the largest collection of their works in the world is in Birmingham. It's in most of it's in the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, and the rest of it's in the Barber Institute of Fine Arts at the University of Birmingham. So on there, you've got Millet, and you've got Rossetti, and I can't remember Hurst. Another good example of Birmingham really is the person to the right. That's Anthony Childs, who is also known as Surgeon. He's a techno artist, and he got into techno with the help of the drummer from Napalm Death, and they used his studio really to ramp up this stark electronic Detroit influenced techno sound. He founded what became known as the Birmingham Sound in the early 90s, and through things like the Q Club, and House of God was his night, really put Birmingham on the map as an alternative dance music venue. That brought people into the city. It's a classic Brum Tech Tapas thing. That I don't know how many people know that. I'm an absolute music geek, so maybe it's just me that knows that. Next on the right is the Electric Cinema, which is the oldest working cinema in the world. I grew up on the right-hand side next to these two towers in Edgbaston, known as the Two Towers, Edgbaston Waterworks Tower and Perrott's Folly, which of course are the famous two towers from Lord of the Rings, because J.R.R. Tolkien's entire work of Lord of the Rings is completely influenced by his upbringing in Birmingham. If anyone wants to know where the Eye of Sauron comes from, it's the University of Birmingham's Clock Tower, Old Joe, which you can see looks like a giant eye from the distance. So a little bit of event information. I'll just crack on to get onto our speakers, because you came here to see them and not to see me. So we have a code of conduct. So for anyone outside of the tech world, this is something that comes from the tech world, but it's less applicable for an online event like this, but we will be doing this in person. I'll get onto that in a sec. A code of conduct basically says, here are the rules, be nice to each other. We have a chat that's being moderated in YouTube, and so any comments and things like that need to adhere to the code of conduct. We expect it from our attendees, and we expect it from our speakers. But if you want to see the full works, it's there, but the sort of too long don't read is, don't be racist and judge people on weight or color or gender, etc., etc. So if there are if you feel like there's any violation of the code of conduct, tell a moderator or contact us on Twitter, and then we will take the appropriate action that is written in the code of conduct so that we can ban someone from future events. And getting on to when this is in person, when this whole COVID nightmare ends, and we can actually enjoy some time speaking to people, in a sociable fashion, which I think I've forgotten how to do, hence me standing up in front of a camera like this. We'll be running this at Iron House, which is below our studios in the Jewellery Quarter. It's a huge conference and art gallery space, and it's a really, really cool venue, so that's where we'll be. Lastly, and this is very important, if you like what you see, or you've got talking points, or something is controversial, you want to speak about something, or you like what you see, or you've got any kind of feedback, Brum Tech Tapas is our hashtag. Use it on any socials across Insta or Facebook or Twitter. So it's important really that our attendees, that we see how they feel, because obviously this is our first event, and we need to know what people want and what people like, and as I say, what people don't like. But probably just me, because our speakers will obviously be amazing. So that's it for all of that. So we'll get onto our first speaker. So Joe Shuppler founded Independent Birmingham in 2013, and it was off the back of one of his friends was running Independent Liverpool, and so it was off the sort of the success of that. And he spoke to him and said, "Well, actually, can I launch Independent Birmingham?" And really, it's become, I wouldn't say a bit of a runaway success. I would say it's become a massive success. I mean, the actual newsletter itself has got 100,000 people subscribed to it, and I think I'd probably class that as quite a big success. But rather than just the subscribers, it's more than that. It's made Birmingham a destination to come to because of the indie scene that it's propelling, and that's a massive amount of of influence and a success story that obviously is good for independent Birmingham, but is awesome for the city and is good for our independence. So the membership card, which I'm a member of it, gives you discounts and offers for an amazing amount of independent venues and places that I personally love going to the city, like Sturchley Wines and Loki Wines and Indian Brewery and Cho Red's, Laggy's Deli, those kind of places. They've all been supported by the programme, and it gets people, importantly for me, gets people out of chains and into places that are being run by people with a passion that matter. So here to speak on the founding and running of Independent Birmingham, please welcome to the stage, everyone, Joe Shopler.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me. Yeah, just a quick correction. We have 10,000 newsletter subscribers. We have 100,000 different visitors to the website per month, but I just thought I'd put that out there because it sounds crazy amazing to have 100,000 people signed up to a newsletter, but it is 10,000 and 100,000 unique visitors to the website per month. So for those of you who don't know, I am Joe and I run Independent Birmingham, which is a website, membership scheme and events company that celebrates independent culture in Birmingham and champions the city. As Jim touched on, I went to Liverpool University and my friend co-founded Independent Liverpool. And when I was there myself, I kind of went out on all the independent bars and pubs and restaurants and things like that, especially during the second and third year, as I began to kind of explore the city that I was, calling my home for the 3 years that I was there. And I found they had such a kind of unique atmosphere, and they were so different to anything else I'd experienced that it kind of, started this real passion within myself. And I've come from Birmingham. I've lived here my whole life, and I decided that after university I'd move back home, and I didn't know a single independent. I was kind of wandering around the city, and I thought, wow, like this is something I'm hugely passionate about, and I don't know a single independent. And I just thought to myself, if that's the case, and if I'm this passionate and I don't know about these places, and there are other people who would like to know about them, and I can help connect those people to the independents and vice versa. So I talked to my friends, and that was it. And then kind of, the early days, which were 7 days a week, 12, 13, 15 hours a day, sat at a laptop trying to kind of build the brand, because the whole ethos behind it was to encourage people to get out of their houses, off their sofas, and out and about in the city to explore its lesser known aspects, and to, rediscover the Birmingham and fall in love, rediscover Birmingham and fall in love with their city all over again. And so it started off as a fairly simple blog. I'm not going to lie, sometimes I see visuals from back then and snapshots, and it looks pretty terrible. But I went out and about, and I discovered these places that I thought were really interesting, and I thought other people would want to know about. And I started writing about them, building the social media pages, all with the thought that I would eventually bring out the Independent Birmingham membership card, which was the first product from Independent Birmingham. So I spent about 8 to 9 months building the brand before I approached independents to talk about the Independent Birmingham membership card. And I just said to them, look, I have this terrific kind of social media following and database of people who want to explore the city and who I'm actively encouraging to get out there and support local. And this is a scheme that I really believe in, that I think has legs and can encourage even more people to get out and about and support local. So for those of you who don't know much about Independent Birmingham, the Independent Birmingham membership card was a credit card sized plastic card that had a wonderful piece of artwork from a local artist on the back. We changed the artist each year, and it enabled the owner to get various discounts and deals at over 100, 125, 135 different independents across the city. So it's a way for people to kind of, have a pride in the like local independent scene and own this wonderful piece of artwork for your pocket, but it also encouraged them to get out there and support local. Um, and yeah, I mean, like I launched it with a fairly like not the biggest social media audience that I probably should have. And for the first year and a half, no one really cared about it much. So I kind of sat to my laptop for a long time and made people care. And yeah, since its inception in 2014, when I launched the IB card, until the last one before we launched the digital version, which is the Independent Birmingham app, we managed to sell over 50,000 cards. So that's a tremendous amount of people who have purchased this product and have used it to explore Birmingham, support local, and support the local economy and the local heroes behind that. Um, and then following on from that, we launched the Independent Birmingham app, which was always the plan, but people loved the physical card and they loved the artwork aspect of it, and they loved the simplicity of it. But for me, it was launching the app made it more of a complete product. We went from a card that you pulled out of your pocket and chose the independent on arrival to a piece of technology that gave you an interactive map of the city. It lists all 140 plus different independents who are currently on the app, and it categorizes them by area, what they are, and which day you'd like to go visit. And there's also a wish list where you can create your own to visit list. So now that lockdown's hopefully coming to an end and places are reopening in April and May, you can go on your app, you can put a star next to the independents that you want to visit first, and make a fun game of visiting all these places on your wish list. And then once you've done that, you create a whole new wish list. So that's the bare bones of it, and that's the main product of Independent Birmingham. But alongside that, we have an event side where we launch. We've done a number of events across the year. I know Jim from one of the pub quizzes that we did at the Dining Club, where his friend stood up and gave the Aragon speech in front of the Black Gate to win an IB card. And yeah, on top of that, we've thrown 6 or 7. I can't remember which. The years all blur into one. But we've thrown some really fun foodie events across the years. The biggest ones are the Independent Birmingham Festival at Aston Hall and the one at the Bond, where we curate a weekend-long celebration of all things independent in Birmingham. We're talking pop-up restaurants, street food, cocktail bars, craft beer, microbreweries, and kind of a whole market hall of independent retailers and artists, bakers and makers. And then we get amazing live bands to come down and play on the main stage. And it really is like a wonderful celebration of the city of Birmingham and the independents who are the heart and soul of that. So we do that as well. And then, yeah, I mean, the most visual aspect of the business is the fact that we're a go-to guide to discovering independence in Birmingham. So you may have seen us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're constantly trying to find new places that we think people will be excited to visit and excited to discover, and just encouraging people in general to get out there, rediscover their city, and support local in the meantime. And we currently have over 125,000 followers across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we reach between 2 to 2.5 million people per month, and sometimes it's more than that. And that's something that I've noticed during lockdown has increased, as there's a kind of more prevalent trend towards supporting local independence. I think lockdown's kind of shown people what they do and don't enjoy, and it's shown people the importance of supporting local. And that's something that they've been able to discover independent Birmingham and gone, well, what's local to me? And we've kind of created this go-to guide that's enabled people to go out and discover their city. And it's also connected the independents to the audience as well, which is terrific, because a lot of independents over lockdown have had to they've had to adapt, and they've, like, during the first one, no one really kind of had a clue what was going on, and the government was kind of imposing a lot of restrictions and then taking them away. And it was a very confusing time for the independents, who were thinking, how am I going to survive? Because whilst all this is going on and they're all closed, rent is accruing, you hear about rent holidays, but it doesn't mean they don't pay it. It just means that it accrues into a lump sum that they have to pay later down the line. So yeah, so a lot of people are asking as well, how can we support local during lockdown? And yeah, so we curated this massive guide that we thought would help people connect our brilliant audience to the brilliant independents in Birmingham, and showed them the places that were offering takeaways and collection or deliveries to their door. If people aren't kind of confident to go out and about and go somewhere to physically get a takeaway or collect something, they could get it delivered to their door. And it wasn't just food and drink as well, because obviously people love food and drink, and I do as well. But Birmingham's independent scene is much more than that. And so we kind of included the creatives who, like offer brilliant wares themselves. And there was everything on there. There's lifestyle, there's baked goods, there's drinks, there was, artwork for your home, Brum merch. And yeah, it's one of our highest read articles of all time. I like to think that we helped a lot of independents during lockdown to really kind of connect with our audience. And yeah, I'm hoping it kind of, I'm hoping it kept them going. And it's something I'm passionate about. And I've put the last 7 years of my life into supporting independence. So I'm really glad to see that lockdown's hopefully ending. There's a roadmap out of this situation, and hopefully when venues can reopen again from April and May onwards, there's a real surge for people to support these brilliant businesses who have kept us going during lockdown, kept us sane. Like when you're kind of sad and a bit down and you thought, like I've got another night of cooking, who was there to help you with that? Like, Birmingham's Independents, that they were there delivering the bao buns and fried chicken and the pizza, and kind of giving you the DIY kits so you could have a bit of fun at home, recreating your favorite dishes, and ready to drink cocktails and cans of craft beer and everything like that. So yeah, it's been a privilege connecting our audience with that. And in the midst of that, we've kind of cemented ourselves even more as a go-to guide to discovering independent in Birmingham. And it's something that, kind of coming out of the pandemic, we are going to try even harder to live up to that. So I've been told that I've got a number of questions to be asked. So yeah, let's go ahead with that. Yeah, obviously it's been really tough for businesses during the pandemic. I kind of touched on it before, but yeah, like it was incredibly tough, and people had to adapt so quickly to survive. And unfortunately, not everyone has. There have been a few independents who have had to close their doors for good, and it's really, it's really sad, because they're the kind of people who are the heart and soul of the city. I always say that. It's something that I say quite a lot. Like, the independents are the lifeblood of this city, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. But I mean, I think the pandemic created this need for people to discover hyperlocal. People were stuck inside their homes. They had to discover the independents who were in their nearest vicinity, because that's where they're getting their food and drink delivered from. And there's the butchers and things as well, and the zero waste grocery stores who are offering people an alternative to standing outside in the rain and going through the rammed supermarkets. And I feel like the pandemic has, helped surge this trend of hyperlocal that over the last 2 to 3 years was kind of coming to the forefront. I know if a lot of you have lived and worked in Birmingham over the last kind of 3 4 years, you'll have noticed a surge of independents who are opening up in the city. It seems, kind of before last year, that every week someone was opening up, and it's a really exciting time to live and work in a city, and it was so amazing. And now I think that because people were stuck inside their homes and they couldn't go very far, they had to discover the places that were local to them. And yeah, it's something that I really truly believe is going to be massive in people's lives. And I think people are more conscious now of where stuff comes from, where their food comes from, who they support, and believing in the brands that say something about them and have a kind of clear story and a message. And yeah, I think hyperlocal is something that is going to, not just like take off like it already has, but I think it's going to be the prevalent, kind of trend or way of life as it is from now on. So yeah, the Solihull expansion is going really well. So we kept it under the Independent Birmingham name because that's obviously where we've got the biggest reach and the the kind of biggest audience and things like that. And it was something I wanted to do for a while. But I was kind of waiting for the right time. There's only two of us who run Independent Birmingham. I ran it myself for 4.5 years on my own, and now I finally have someone who runs it with me. And it's 75 to 80 hour grueling weeks and things. We don't kind of really take days off. I kind of have half a day off a week and stuff. So there's already so much going on in the areas that we covered there. It was quite hard to kind of branch out and trying to encompass more, but it's something that I noticed more people were asking for. So yeah, and we had a number of people saying when you're kind of gonna encompass Solihull, like when's that happening? And Hampton Manor, who featured at our previous Independent Birmingham Festival at Aston Hall, they kind of said, oh yeah, like when can we join? And I'm a big fan of theirs, so I was kind of like, yeah, soon. And yeah, so we launched it. We launched in Solihull, and yeah, it's gone really terrific, really well. Like we've got about 10 to 15 independents from across Solihull who've joined the app, offering amazing discounts and deals. Encouraging people to physically visit them. But then the pandemic hit, and things have kind of slowed down on that front because obviously venues aren't open, and our app's not geared towards online sales as much. It's hard for someone to know that someone's got the app online. So I always, when I created the Independent Birmingham membership card, I was 22, and I didn't kind of, have that much of a clue. And over the years, it's evolved, but there's still an aspect of it's a simple product, and so the app, there's no way to tell if someone has it online. You just kind of, you're meant to turn up to a venue and show it, and it's meant to get people into venues. That was the whole point behind it. And so yeah, during lockdown, that's obviously slowed, and we haven't really added many people to the app. We've added a number, and we've got a lot on the way who are joining over the next few weeks as places start to reopen. But yeah, so somewhere that's got some really exciting independence, and it's quite a large borough, so I can't wait to kind of really jump in and start adding more of them to the app and getting people from Birmingham and those suburbs to Solihull and vice versa, and kind of get as many people across Birmingham and Solihull supporting all of the independents in those areas. What do you think could be done with the space? John Lewis, all sorts. It's massive. I mean, it's tough because obviously, like, the owners of Grand Central will try to charge quite a large amount of rent for that. But there's so many interesting things that could happen with that. Like there could be areas where there's independent retail, so they could have areas that are dedicated to indie creatives and makers who have amazing kind of wares that range from everything from vases, like ceramic vases, to prints, to t-shirts and caps and glassware and everything like that. There's so many aspects of independent, and that could be housed there. They could have rotating food traders in there, make it into a giant food court. There's so many possibilities. It's hard to encourage people to take a punt on independence. For some reason, there's this stigma that if you're an independent business, you're less reliable than a big chain. But I think the trend has shown that the big chains are the ones who come to the city and then they close down. So, we've seen chains come to the city because they think, oh, it's so exciting. There's so many independents here who are at the forefront, who are driving things forwards. And you see a number of them try to replicate what these independents are doing. And then, yeah, they end up struggling. And, Byron Burger was a big one. Everyone kind of was like, oh, they're coming to the city, and there are a lot of independent alternatives. And they really struggled. So I think landlords should take more of a punt on independence. I don't think that perceived risk value of, oh, I'm not going to get my rent is there. I really don't believe in that. So I would like I would like it to be some like a hub of independence, but I kind of I'm gonna be a bit reserved about it because um, I don't think there are people who are going to make that happen. To be honest. Okay, so how can people help support independence during the last month's lockdown and as they begin to reopen? Well, if you head to the Independent Birmingham website, independent-birmingham.co.uk, we have the article on there, a terrific resource that denotes a large array of independents across Birmingham and Solihull who offer takeaway, delivery, and collection services. So yeah, if you fancy some food one night, you can order a takeaway delivered directly to your door if you're not confident to go out, or you can get a DIY kit from one of your favorite independents who, so you can replicate your favorite dishes at home. The microbreweries across the city are sending out cans of their amazing local produce and things. And yeah, then on top of that, there's a creative. So if you have a blank space on your wall and you want something beautiful, you can discover some amazing independents who kind of create beautiful prints and things like that. And it's not just that. Like you can also buy vouchers to be used at a future date, and obviously, like the pandemic's hit people quite a lot. So there are free ways to support independence. You can be really active on social media. You can save their posts. You can like them. You can share them with your friends. And encourage other people to discover and support them. There are so many ways you can support independent, and it doesn't always involve money. But yeah, that's it. Head to the website. It's got a really terrific database on there of independents, and that's just a starting point. And you can kind of discover some of your favorites out and about and things as well as as long as you're keeping safe and within the rules. There's no reason why you can't kind of walk around your local area and discover some fabulous independents. In terms of as places start to reopen, yeah, that's great. I mean, obviously, what I would say is book into your favorite bars and restaurants. Try to help people as much as possible. Obviously, not everyone's going to be comfortable going out and about at that point. If someone isn't, leave them to it. Not everyone's going to be comfortable going out and about. But what I will say is, if you do book into somewhere, please make sure you turn up. That's going to be one of the most harmful things to an independent business who's, kind of just coming out of the other side of the lockdown is if they get a load of people booking on an impulse and going, yeah, I really want to go to this place. And then, you don't turn up because you booked like 5 or 6 different places on the same weekend. That's going to be extremely detrimental to these independents. So I'd say that. I'd say, kind of be safe, be kind. Everyone's in the same boat. It's a really tough situation. People are stressed, people are upset. And, the people at these venues, they're trying to be as safe as possible, but they ask you to wear a mask because that's rules. Please wear a mask. It's the rules and things like that. And I think kind of if someone doesn't quite get it right, instead of, going on social media and slamming them, just quietly message them and say, hey, I kind of noticed this when I was visiting. Potentially it needs to be amended or you need to look into it. And yeah, I'd just say, you know what? We've got this amazing article on our website that tells you the very best independents across Birmingham with outdoor seating where you can meet your friends. So it's not just restaurants and bars, it's pubs, it's coffee shops. Have a scroll through that list, pick out an area local to you or that takes your fancy and have a look at some of the independents. And yeah, if something takes your fancy or you've never heard of them before and you like the look of them, book in. And yeah, within what you can, try and just support as many independents as possible because they really do need us now. Now more than ever, it's a really important time to help our city's independents because they won't all make it otherwise, and the city will be poorer for it. How can we encourage them to return, or will that help? Yeah, it's really sad. And last night, Little Blackwood in Moseley announced that they're unable to open their doors again, and it's really tough. I mean, some independents who close their doors won't be coming back. Others will be adapting their business either to online or to doing private catering or something like that. So, in terms of Little Blackwood, they put out a post which we shared, that said they were unable to reopen again, but they were going to do private catering, and that's a way to support them. And essentially, if enough people support them that way, they'll be able to reopen in a physical venue once again. But if your favorite independent's sadly gone, and you still want to support them, like perhaps they're online, and you can discover them online, or they're opening something else under a different iteration or different name, and you can go and support that. But yeah, it's a really tough time for everyone. So the most you can do, it really does help, even if it's only something small, and you donate to a charity, or you buy a gift voucher for a future date, or you just tell your friends about some places. Every little does help, and it really does make a difference. So yeah, please kind of get out there and support as much as possible.
And I've popped up.
Hey. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. So first of all, obviously, my sincere apologies for even the fact that I knew you had 100,000 subscribers. I still, in all my haste, managed to say 10, which is a long shot, a long way far off. I think there's just a couple of thanks very much. It was really sort of it was really interesting hearing you talk about it. There's similar kind of questions to it. To I think maybe the ones that we've had, but I think the number one. When I first moved here, I started asking various indies about this. But for anybody that is thinking of starting an independent business or has one who is watching tonight, how do they approach you for partnership of these of the schemes that you have?
Just email. Try not to message over like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We get thousands of notifications a day and so many like direct messages. It's quite exhausting trying to keep up with it all, because just on Twitter we get the kind of 20+ notification thing about every 20 seconds, and we do miss things. There's only 2 of us, and it is very hard, and we do have a lot of people looking to join, and a lot of people messaging us about stuff, not just the festival, but about cars, like asking for recommendations and things. But the best way is just to head to the website. There's a contact form on there, and yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll get back to you within a short time. And yeah, that's the easiest way for
me. Cool. And also you did one of the things that I saw you announced a couple of days ago was the massive return of the IB festival. I went to the it can't be the last one, was it? I went to the Bond Company one.
No, the last one was the 2019 Aston Hall. The one before that was probably the Bond. But yeah, we launched that because we were meant to do 2 festivals last year. It's about the maximum I can handle. Events just break me. They're really hard, and I have really kind of tremendous respect for people who run events companies, that they are very hard to put on. And so we announced the return of the Independent Birmingham Festival at Aston Hall. It's just a weekend-long celebration of all things independent at the most iconic, stunning, like Grade 1 listed Jacobean Manor. That's Aston Hall, and their brilliant grounds. And yeah, we've the Saturday daytime session sold out, and we've done over 3/4 of the tickets are sold in just over a week. So the response has been really terrific. And
I can imagine if anyone's thinking of a perfect way to come out of the pandemic blues, I mean, surely that's got to be. I think my wife had her first original Patty Man at the Bond Company, which was at the IB Festival, and you mentioned that Byron had gone under. So I mean, really, that story writes itself, really. I think. So. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I think the last kind of one question for me is you mentioned that you started this in sort of 2013, 2014. How do you get you're originally? I mean, really, you're almost like a sort of a new media organization now of a different style of media. How do you get funding to be able to do this? Is it just from advertising, or are there other venue like avenues?
Yeah, I mean, like the way the website's funded is by people signing up for the Independent Birmingham app. That's our kind of main source of income for running this. $1.99 a month, and it gives you access to up to 25% off, 2 for 1, like freebies at over 140 different independents across Birmingham and Solihull, and it's not just a tool for supporting independence, but it also enables us to keep doing what we're doing and keep this vital platform alive for supporting independence. And that's it really. Obviously, the festivals are there to generate income, but sometimes they break even and things, despite the terrific kind of turnout we have, that they're very costly to put on. They're more for showcasing the city and kind of championing Birmingham's independence and being a physical embodiment of the brand, rather than kind of us trying to like scoop in loads of money and things like that.
Yeah, I think I could say, I mean, from the event space, in terms of what I do is developer relations, and that involves speaking in lots of events. And I've got to say, in the tech world, where you think there's loads of economy and money, it's exactly the same. If you break even, it's like the best thing ever. That's just, no one's sort of raking in the cash. Right. Okay. So thank you very much, Joe. We've got to run out of time. Thank you for the questions, everyone. Apologies if we couldn't answer them, if we couldn't ask them all. But if you've got any more questions, go to Independent Birmingham, or contact Joe, or send them a message on Twitter or on Facebook, on the socials. That was really awesome. Thank you very much. And good night, Joe. And it's me again. So on to our second speaker of the evening. I'm really looking forward to this. Dr. Barker and I had a conversation when I was pitching Brum Tech Tapas and the whole thing, and we were looking for speakers, and we had a conversation about her work, and about what she wrote her doctorate in, and a lot of it was really about comparisons between what we see in the tech industry. So in the tech industry in the West Midlands, it's very siloed, where we have these people do this, the startup scene do this, these people do this, and collaboration is extremely hard. And I think any of the other sort of the tech organizations that overarch the city will say exactly the same thing, that getting collaboration is really, really hard. So talking to Victoria about her work, it was really apparent that the same problems exist in the creative industries about how you get collaboration. But really, from what Victoria was saying about the academic work she writes on, is that it's more than just the collaboration. It's how do you measure? How does anybody measure in tech our collaboration across products or across launching services? There's an economic value to it. There's something can be measured in money or revenue, etc. But when it's creative arts, how do you measure the topography of a city, or how do you measure the cultural impact that is created from people that are collaborating together? So on that note, here to speak about her work as a creative ecosystems researcher, please welcome to the stage, everybody, Dr. Victoria.
Hello. Thank you very much for the welcome and for the invite in the first place. Hopefully you can hear me okay. If not, I'm sure I'll get a nudge. But I am Victoria, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher, and I currently work at Coventry University, although I haven't actually been there for the entire time on my contract. So you probably pick up that I'm a bit of an outsider to the West Midlands as well. I'm from Derby, but please don't hold that against me. And I did all my study at Warwick and Coventry universities, and I also spent a year as part of my PhD, as James has said, doing some first-hand research into the creative ecosystem in the West Midlands. So I have taken some of that outside-in perspective, but it's really great to have been invited to talk about that, as well as hearing from some of the other brilliant speakers who actually make the creative ecosystem happen in reality. And I went into academic research in this area because I'd always really enjoyed the arts and theatre, and in fact my first degree was in theatre studies, but I realised that I had no performance talent to make a living from, so I wanted to find out more about how the business end of that really worked. And it also seemed really fascinating to me that there's this really engaging and meaningful creative area of work that connects people through experience. And that needs managing in a really careful way so that those important values around, you know, people and bringing them together can be shared. And also, as I've gone along, there's more that I've discovered that I'm interested in about how that works in different places and at different scales. So whether that's hyperlocal or whether it's national and international, and supporting education and having infrastructure and so on. So my research now is about the creative economy and place. So I look at the networks and collaborations that make creative work happen. I'm really interested in the values that drive creative people and their work. And I'm also interested in how both of those change depending on particular places. And that idea of place, I've developed an interest over time in the theory side of it, but that's perhaps a bit esoteric and deep and meaningful, so I won't go into it too much, but it changes and that's fascinating. So I use the idea of creative ecosystem firstly as a way of describing all of that, just to bring it together, but secondly as a way of constructing the research that I do. I'm working currently on projects around creative freelancers and their business models, inevitably how they've been impacted by the last year's circumstances, and also recently finished one on artists' perceptions of how place shapes their work and their creativity. I've worked as an evaluator on a whole range of sort of creative and arts projects over the past 6 years or so, and I'm also a director of a community interest company called Shed, which takes a flat pack, multi-format shed out to various places. We've been to car parks, we've been to marketplaces, and we set up and we host artistic and participatory events, and we try to spark conversations with communities about what's meaningful to them and what's important, what they'd like to change. So I do come from more of that arts and culture side and background. And over the next 20 minutes or so, what I won't be doing, because I can't for reasons that will become clear, is show you a single picture of Birmingham's creative ecosystem, or anywhere else for that matter. And that's because I really see the creative ecosystem as what you experience and what you develop in your work and your business and generally how you go about your lives. And that's my perspective on it in practice. And you know how that works much better than I do. And the other reason for not coming in and presenting that to you as a fait accompli is that I don't think that's the right thing to do. I don't think researchers should turn up and say, I've got the answers to this. I'm very much about learning as a researcher from the way that the world works. And that's my kind of conceptual approach to it, if you like. So what I would like to do is tell you a bit about how my research got me to my particular understanding of creative ecosystem. And some of the questions that I'm still interested in exploring. So if you are short on time or you were hoping to just nip off for a drinks break for this, then the short version is that the creative ecosystem is a useful heuristic technique. And that means it's a thing that lets us shortcut the complicated bits of decision making or understanding and to really have a shared consensus. And it means that we know we're not starting from a perfect approach, but what we have got is good enough as an approximation for talking about a problem or a situation. So I can say creative ecosystem, you can hear that, and we're broadly on the same page to start talking about similar things. So through the research that I've done, I've tried to unpack that in a bit more detail. And what it's boiled down to for me is 6 elements, which hopefully you can see here. And they cover a range of things that need to exist in some form or other in order for there to be a healthy or at least a functioning ecosystem in a given place. And they go from less tangible but really important things like strategies and policy initiatives, and also the funding and investment that needs to be there but is not the main thing, to the infrastructure that lets us make work and get around. So that's physical infrastructure like cultural buildings and transport systems to get us to and from them. And it's also digital infrastructure like broadband systems and services and the means to communicate with each other. So those top three elements really relate to place in the way that I think about it, and then the other 3 are more related to people. So obviously we've got creatives, we've got independent organisations, we've got artists who make work or products or services, whatever that might be, and then that needs an audience or a customer of some kind. And within that, I think it's really important to include communities who may or may not be directly engaged at that point with your kind of creative process. And then last but by no means least is all the kind of education and training and skills and probably networks that need to be there before, during and after any kind of creative activity so that you can sustain that ecosystem going forward. And so that all started in 2015. And actually, if I'd been aware of Independent Birmingham and the work that was going on there at that point, it would have made my PhD a lot easier. But we live and learn. So I was really lucky, and I got a studentship to do some research into the journey from arts ecology to creative economy. And I started by reading a lot because that's what you do. And I ended up getting really frustrated by all the kind of national policy and all the research that talked about creative entrepreneurship and how it needed to grow and make money, and that was the whole point of running a business, and all the national statistics that talked about how much money the creative industries made every year. And don't worry, I will get back to those, but I got stuck into trying to dismantle the idea that you really had to go from an ecology to an economy, because that didn't seem that simple. It didn't seem to make sense to me. So I came across this idea of a cultural and creative ecosystem that recognised the commercial aspects and the kind of money-making imperative in creative businesses, but also took into account those other kind of value-generating activities that didn't come with a pound sign, whether that was social or cultural or environmental. And although the phrase ecosystem was being bandied around, that's obviously a technical term, there wasn't a fixed model of it, and there wasn't a single definition even that everybody was signing up to. So my research started by looking at other kinds of ecosystem in business and in industry publication, so that I could investigate that using creative industry data. And I wanted to forge ahead with that because it really felt like ecosystem had something to offer to stretch thinking beyond just a value chain or a production chain approach. So at its most simple, then, the ecosystem it's creative people, and it's an environment, and it's the links between the two. And that builds on the idea that cultural and creative sectors are really intertwined with lots of other sectors. And there's a quote from another academic called Justin O'Connor, who says, "The creative industries operate within a complex ecosystem that involves not just artists and business people, but almost every area of urban life." So it's a bit of a catch-all, but it really chimed with the way that I'd experienced creative industries and theatre and arts, and the focus that I wanted to take in my research. So I am going to say a little bit more about how UK policy has focused on creative industries and their huge financial growth. And the thing we track in doing that, those pound signs, that thing hasn't changed in the last 24 or so years, but does it really measure and value everything that's important? Has to be said, the methods for working out those numbers has changed, but that's another presentation. It's really complicated. But I want to rewind a bit to how I got to my ecosystem debate and the background to that. And I've done a little bit of thinking about how Birmingham looks in that regard. So I'll share that with you, but it's by no means complete, and it's definitely that outside in perspective. But then I'll come back to the kind of ecosystem overall and my ongoing questions. So in general terms, then, this idea of the creative industries, it came about as part of a shift from arts and culture to culture and creative activity being seen as industry sectors in their own right. And I'm going to say it was around the 1940s, but it's a movable feast. But around the 1940s, there was also a load of criticism of that because it focused on mass production, and it's. The criticism was that kind of demeaned the high values of culture, and it was just it was dumbing down, I guess, would be the contemporary parallel. It was turning culture and art into a kind of a sausage factory approach, and that wasn't good enough because it demeaned the values in it in the first place. So there's lots of research and debate around who benefits from that sort of approach, and highbrow and lowbrow approaches, to use horrible shorthand. But that move through to this kind of industrial and production focused approach led then to particular ways of seeing the value of those bits of what became the economy. And then you get skipping forward to the 80s and 90s, there was a real growth in the use of that sector. So Jim alluded to it in the introduction, creativity became a kind of lever in lots of places for urban regeneration, alongside a growth in technology and processing power and capabilities. And I'm paraphrasing quite a lot, obviously, but that led to huge changes in who could make culture and who could access creative products, and different ways of thinking about business models that came out of that, including a focus on intellectual property. And then we fast forward again to the late 90s, which was a critical time for the creative industries, although a number of things happened at this point. So I just wanted to put us all in the 1997 zone. So the BBC News online service launched as a kind of round-the-clock thing. Grand Theft Auto came out in one of its early iterations. The Teletubbies and Channel 5 burst onto the screens. Some book came out that I think they've made into a film. Just over there, that's Derby County Stadium. Dolly the Sheep was hatched, and various forms of music. Don't judge me on my musical taste. But the main thing I want to use for this particular purpose is the Labour general election victory in May 1997, and as well as their manifesto slogan about education, they had their sights set on that intellectual property approach to what came to be called the creative industries. So they set up this creative industries task force, and then they, over the next year or so, produced a mapping document that set out what they defined as this set of industry sectors and started to come up with ways of measuring them. There's been some really interesting work done in the last year or so which looked at how that came about, and it has to be said they kind of made it up as they went along, but it obviously stuck, because they came up with these industry sectors and they measured them, and this is the gross value added in billions of pounds that the creative industries gave to the UK over time. So in terms of dividing it up into sectors, it went from advertising and marketing, it included architecture. For a while it included art and antiques, and then that got moved. Crafts is always a kind of low level because of the way that they count things. Design, fashion, film, TV, video, etc. IT, software and computer services always flying the flag, but it caused lots of arguments about what was really creative and what was counted. And then museums was the last one, next to music and visual arts and performing arts. So as a kind of race through those changes in economic contribution over time, but it shows you how significant the creative industries are and why they're still interesting to policymakers. And I've just put those areas of the ecosystem as I see it here again to give you a sense of where certain things slot in and the questions that prompts for me, particularly in Birmingham. So from the 90s, and in fact before, as Jim said in his introduction, there've been really clear strategies that focus on the creative sector in the city and as a way to change external perspectives and encourage investment. And that goes right back to regional development agencies. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of them or remembers those, but they had a real strategic focus on digital and screen media. And then from a finance and investment perspective, there's been, from 2001, for about 10 years or so, there's been about 15 million of European and local authority funding ploughed into various things. There's obviously the Commonwealth Games coming in as a form of investment and interest. On the flip side, it has been pointed out that West Midlands creative businesses do less well in the number and the success rate of their applications for public funding. And I know that I'm switching between Birmingham and West Midlands quite a lot, but there's a learning point for me in that the data across those things isn't always comparable or available all the time. But in relation to infrastructure then, there's been tons going on, as you will know much better than me, but Custard Factory was one of the big flagship things for creative industries, as well as initiatives like Steam House, which has got lots of support from Birmingham City University in particular, which leads us through to education. And there's universities, there's colleges, there's creative startup and there's creative scale-up programs in the mix. And from the perspectives of individuals working in the sector, this is based on 2015 data, but there were around 5,000 businesses in the creative industries in the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership area. So it's a different type of geography, but still relevant. And over half of those were in IT, software and computer services. And as with the creative industries and the UK profile of business as a whole, around 94% of those were micro enterprises, which was the focus of my PhD research. A micro enterprise has fewer than 10 employees. This doesn't take into account freelancers and independent artists and people doing stuff in their spare time while they've got a salaried job to pay bills. But on the employment side, there were 27,500 jobs in the creative industries in 2015. And that had grown quite a bit over the past 5 years, but not as much as other areas of the country. And around 14,000 of those jobs were in IT and software. And again, that had grown 10% in the last 5 years, but not as much as other places in the country where it had grown about 32% on average. And then moving over to an audience and a community perspective, there's a view arts-wise that audiences often come from outside the city, which is a challenge, but it means that there's a potential for the arts venues and practitioners to more effectively reach communities within the city, potentially. And I'll perhaps say a bit more about audience and community connections in relation to my own work now. But for this, I've just drawn out some of the more easily accessible numbers. And it's quite a high level, and it wasn't at all put together at 10 o'clock last night. But there's a suggestion in looking at that as a whole that Birmingham's creative ecosystem has definitely had significant policy interests, and funding has been pumped into regeneration and to infrastructure. There's this whole raft of education-related activity, but the city might be punching below its weight in terms of its creative community, and it could potentially reach more and different audiences and communities. And that might ring true with you, it might not, but it illustrates the structure that I use to think around an ecosystem and also the connections between those elements. So I've already explained why I wanted to explore ecosystem itself, because it stretches beyond kind of this financial value frame and connects to issues around cultural value in a better way for me. But I'll just say a little bit about how I approached my research to give you a sense of where I'm coming from in terms of the questions that I've still got about it. So I did my research in the West Midlands in 2016, which is kind of similar time to when the Combined Authority approaches and their strategies focused on creative industries was coming out. And I took national data on the creative industries and I tried to slot that into existing non-creative models of ecosystem to see what that looks like. And it's described here as top-down, but outside-in might be just as good a way of describing it. And I wanted to see whether the creative sector really fit into entrepreneurial models of an ecosystem or organisational development models. And spoiler alert, no, not really. It did give a certain perspective, but it couldn't really get into the detail of networks and micro enterprises that are that huge proportion of the creative industries. So I went bottom up or inside out, whichever way you want to look at it. And I created a number of really detailed case studies of micro enterprises in Birmingham. I interviewed the owners and the operators of those businesses and looked through their accounts, not in a forensic way, but I wanted to see where and how they were connected to different bits of what I thought might be the ecosystem over time. And that time thing was really important as well. And that gave a richer sense of the journey of those businesses and the paths that they'd taken, whether that was by design or just by circumstance. And so the need to have kind of top-down and bottom-up perspectives is something that I'm writing up at the moment elsewhere. But the blending of the two gave a much more detailed and a different perspective that you just wouldn't have got with one or the other. And another thing that came out of both of those perspectives was this idea that the creative ecosystem is a different shape and it's a different experience for everybody. Hence me saying at the start that I wouldn't be giving you a fixed picture of what this was. But all of those different experiences and the journeys make up the bigger ecosystem, and it's the richer for it. So, more is more. And also, all of those individuals and those businesses that I spoke to had got connections from the hyperlocal right through to the international. And taking any work forward, I think, really needs to recognise that range of connections and the diversity of experience. So I should also say the 6 areas that I'm working with now came out of workshopping this concept with a local authority who are not in the West Midlands, but making it a better fit to their needs and understanding from an arts and culture perspective particularly. And I've since gone back and reflected on where that's been useful, and where there are issues. And I'm actually heading straight off from this event to speak about that at a conference in Japan. Sadly, also from the cupboard under the stairs, not actually in Japan. But there are a few things coming up for me in terms of what next, that I've again pegged onto different areas of the ecosystem to just give it some structure. So from a strategy perspective, in the areas that I work, there's a lot being talked about co-creation in strategic terms, and there's also, as you would expect, lots of discussion about building back and how that's focused on place. And there's lots of chat that I'm kind of sort of involved in some places about what culture can do to kind of reinvigorate the high street if retail is going to be struggling as much as it has been. And that leads to lots of different funding and investment possibilities. But also from a research point of view, that's also talking a lot more about collaboration and trust-based networks, which I know is familiar to lots of you, but gives opportunities for these sort of interdisciplinary collaborative approaches. But the ways of doing that have kind of been thrust upon us in one sense. So digital has been accelerated by the circumstances we're in, and we're more digital than lots of us thought we could be. So our view of the infrastructure has probably changed, but I think it's also true to say that that's not the same for everybody. And there's work to do to make that feasible for people to continue in this sort of blended or hybrid way. Universities are really engaged in that, and I think there are more opportunities for all of us to get stuck into that as part of the knowledge exchange agenda, because, as I said, my perspective as a researcher is I've got more to learn than I have to teach. And I think that's true of universities as well, but I'm not sure they would all agree with me. But on that, I think I'd also throw in something really important that I'm interested in about the value of arts and humanities subjects before we lose them because they're not profitable. So they underpin a lot of the creative work that happens. And on artists and creatives and the workforce, there's not just that kind of underpinning education. There's an issue of, how on earth will the system change to give opportunities back to groups of people like freelancers who have seen their work damaged or completely destroyed over the last year. And then finally, but again by no means least, there are the audiences and the communities that we need to consider in the future. And there are two things here that I'm particularly interested in. The first of those is a more literal notion of ecosystem and the environment as a focus of work, because we all have this wider responsibility to the places that we live and work to sustain them for the future. And also the second thing, in shaping what we do from now, we need to listen more to the voices that haven't had the chance to take part and to be more equitable in how we do that, which then brings us back to co-creation as a principle and a strategy. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of those components and the ways that they're intertwined. And these complex ecosystems have often grown organically, but that doesn't mean that we can't intervene to change things. And so to do that, we need to understand who has the commercial drivers and who has those wider or different cultural and social drivers. So having said I would talk about how it works in practice, there are a couple of things just to finish up. One is that the connections between things are often as important, if not more important, than the things themselves. And any business or individual can use these areas to think through who you're connected to and how that can help drive your work forward and how to build a richer ecosystem in the place that you live and work. But again, I think it's also important to think about who you're not connected to and who's not in that picture and who doesn't get chance to maximise their connections because they can't break into a network. And just because ecosystem sounds nice and fluffy and ecological doesn't mean it's inclusive. Anything you're putting a boundary round acts as a barrier to the person on the other side. So if you are clued up about this and you do have good connections, then that's great. And who can you pass your hand to bring along with you next? Because a creative ecosystem is not owned by or the responsibility of any one individual or organisation. It thrives when there are passionate people in it who are driving their work forward based on values and who are making connections. And yes, of course, there's a need to fund that somehow, but you all know very well it's not by sitting back and being passive that things get done and that change gets made. And I think that's abundantly clear from all the speakers in this lineup this evening, which is where I will stop and let you hear from the rest of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I love there was some great sort of closing points on there that really sort of rang true. I mean, for us in the tech ecosystem, and then for the other people in the other people in the arts as well. That was really fascinating. I have got. I mean, I've got like a page of notes, but I think the audience take priority over me. So we do have some. Here we go. We do have some questions.
Oh, wow. Okay. If I wanted to read your research on how place affects creative ecosystems, where could I find it? You can find my thesis in the British Library, but good luck to you with that one. I am currently finishing off a paper which is about the kind of top-down, bottom-up approach and how that applies. So who knows if that gets accepted? I will certainly let you know. I think probably what I ought to do is just write my own stuff up as a blog probably and get that out there. Currently, I'm at Coventry University, and some of my project kind of write-ups are on the Coventry University Research blog. I think it's called Curb. So
is there the thesis at the British Library? Is there a digitalized version of it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's I think the thesis repository is called Ethos. So anybody who's done a thesis in the last, I don't know, 20 years maybe, they're in there, accessible to people. But really, what I need to do is write it and publish it more. So, the slide that I didn't put up was just my Twitter handle. So if people find me on Twitter or on LinkedIn, then I can always share things as I publish.
I think we might be able to get a pop up, or at least we should be able to get a pop up with your Twitter handle on there, so that we can consume things the modern way, not the official academic way, you know, old dusty papers. This is one of my questions.
Okay, which cities and regions do you think are doing a really good job of investing in creative industries, and who can we learn from? There's lots of places who are really interested in it, and they're all doing it differently, which actually I guess is the point, because they should all be doing it differently. There's something called the Preston model. I don't know if you've heard of that. It wasn't specifically creative industries, but it's a really interesting kind of focus on the local.
That rings a vague bell.
It was all about how the local authority should prioritise local suppliers and provide all the things. So I think that's quite interesting in the same way as in sort of a values-based approach. I mean, I'm not saying it because I work for the university, but I think Coventry is doing interesting things. I don't know if everybody in Coventry's, well, in fact, I do. I know that not everybody in Coventry's creative community agrees with how things are happening. I think probably Glasgow is quite a good place to look at for how they've publicised certainly their kind of investment and the priorities there.
Which actually the part of the question actually matters. Sort of the first one I want to know is who's doing it well. You mentioned Glasgow. I mean, Edinburgh is supposed to be famous for its indie scene, which obviously ties in with what Joe was saying. But have you ever had a chance to look at Edinburgh as well? Maybe
not in a policy sense. No, I mean the work that I finished my PhD in 2018. So I'm still in the stages of writing up that, which means that, you know, most of my focus is on the English Midlands at the moment. But it's a great question, and it's certainly something that I want to explore further. And I'm just trying to rack my brains for, you know, I don't think there is one city or region that's absolutely nailed it, because even if they've got it right for them, that's not necessarily going to work down the road.
Yeah.
And it depends on the type of approach that they've taken as well. So back in the 80s, London had the kind of Greater London Council, I think it was, and that kind of kicked off this creative regeneration idea, and then you get to creative cities and the creative class, and you know, I don't know how the creative community feels about it, but certainly in the academic community there's quite a lot of criticism about that, because it was just gentrifying. And then you've got things at the moment like Arts Council's scheme called Creative People and Places, which is all about going to communities and saying, well, what do you want? You know, we can see that you don't necessarily buy tickets for venues in your area, so Arts Council language, we assume that you're not engaged, but what are you doing instead? And there's funding to support new programs that take that sort of approach. So I think it is a bit of a cop out, but it's kind of horses for courses.
Cool. Are there any? I don't know. I'm not sure if there's any others. I've got a couple of questions written down as well. Yeah. Okay. So there's the thing is, yeah. There's I don't know. Well, really, I think Matt's taken my big question out of my mouth. I think really just like a sort of if you ever, this is probably an easier question to you. Have you ever actually done the policy shaping for government as part of your research, or?
Yeah, for local authorities. So the model that I work with now as a creative ecosystem was the basis for a local authority's cultural strategy. So I think we've had a nudge to wrap things up. So I won't say too much more about it. But yes, basically.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Victoria Barker. And unfortunately, you're back with me, but only temporarily. So the next speaker, I am mildly interested, stroke terrified to find out, to see what he's going to speak about. So I used to do a long walk through Birmingham city centre. It was about half an hour every day for about 2 years. I got off the bus at Colmore Row from Halesowen, and then walked to Digbeth. And I can honestly say, and it sounds ridiculous, and honestly say one of my highlights of that daily trudge was finding out whether this man had put up a new poster or not. And the one that springs to mind that I was just absolutely hilarious was, I mean, Victoria's just done a talk about the creative ecosystems and how they work, and Joe has just done a talk about the independence in Birmingham. So I will only briefly touch upon the fact that the largest Primark in the world is in Birmingham, and it's not something we should probably be shouting about. But Focke-Wulf hit the mark a little bit too close to the bone, I think, with a poster that got posted outside Primark. I don't know how long I stayed there for. You'll probably be able to answer that. Yeah, it was a hilarious poster. So type in Focke-Wulf and Primark and have a look at what we are all thinking secretly inside. A lot of his posters had phone numbers on them, and it wasn't until recently, and I'll let him talk about this, that I realised that people were actually phoning the phone numbers that were on there, but were phoning them in a way that they clearly had been taken in but they hadn't properly looked at the content of the satire of the poster, which really is really interesting, because it makes you think, well, you know, what if it's that easy to dupe people? What in the age of misinformation and fake news, what can you get away with? And if you go to Focke-Wulf's website, you'll see on the stuff that he's selling, you'll see there's a lot of a theme that kind of runs through that. Here to I'll stop waffling on now and slightly nervously welcome to the stage. Can everyone give a warm welcome to Focke-Wulf?
Hello there. Yes, can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, mate. It's all good.
Brilliant. Okay, cheers.
Just full screen it. When I disappear, yeah, you can't hear me. So there we go.
Great. Okay, brilliant. All right then. So yeah, I'm Focke-Wulf. I'm a street artist from Birmingham. I've probably been doing it for possibly over 10 years now. But so when I started out, I used to stick up these big sort of illustrations of just sort of random things. And I guess it was sort of like a hobby that I used to do. Sticking up sort of weird characters like this Homer Simpson decapitated head and things like that. And I had this was my sort of like logo I'd do these split up heads. This guy's got pants on his head, so I thought I'd just zoom in there. Yeah, so I was doing that for about 10 years, and then about 3 years ago, while I was nursing a hangover, I just started to write down just random stuff that was in my head, and on stickers that I had lying about. So I just basically started to write these classified adverts, and would go around and then just started sticking them to lampposts, stuff like this. And then I thought, what would happen if I had my knowledge of large format printing? What if I mixed it with this idea of having these classified adverts? So then I came up with this design, and I printed it out. It was about 3 meters by 2 meters, and stuck it at a traffic lights outside Birmingham city centre. So this was the one. Yeah, then it got a lot of sort of coverage. I guess it would have done like a viral. So and it was in newspapers and things like that. Well, on online. But I had a real phone number attached to them. So these are some of the recordings from that one.
Mate, just interested in the piece, the large message, because I've got a Range Rover. Could you call me back on 07968 171? Thank you. Hello, I was just inquiring about the penis enlargement. I saw your advert in Birmingham. Could you call me back, please? Hello. Is this the place for the penis enlargement? Call me back, please. Thank you. My husband just recently bought a Range Rover. Basically, I've put it advertisement. I wonder if you can book him for an enlargement. Thank you. Can you get back to me? Hello, I'd like my penis enlarged, please. Right, sir.
So yeah. Oh.
Right, sir.
Yeah, it sort of created this sort of dialogue with people on the streets, which I just found fascinating at the time. And so then, yeah, I just kept on pushing it. So then I stuck this one up outside Cannon Hill Park, and I ended up getting sort of people calling the number. I haven't got them. I didn't record them, but I had people giving me death threats, saying they were going to find me and kill me. And then also I had the head of the Pentecostal church in Birmingham left a message, and he wanted to meet me for a chat about these posters. And then, yeah, so I kept on going with it, really. This is the Greg's Theme Park one that I did that went up in Digbeth, sort of tricked a few people. This is like a best of a few of them.
Hi, I drive a 4x4. I've seen an advertisement for a penis enlargement. I would like to take this offer, please. My number is 0901110. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hello. Hello. What is the fuck? We're told, ladies, we'd love how to learn how to steal a moped. I wish to scrap people in phone transfers now. I want to try to fake Rolex. I like to ride motorcycles. I like riding. Hi, it's Boisel here. I might be a moped mugger. We'll be back. Bye-bye. Hi. I saw your advert for voodoo classes, and I'm just ringing to make some inquiries. Can you call me back on this number? Thanks very much. Bye. Took your mum, yeah, go do that.
Yeah, so this is so now this is one that I'd stuck up in London when all the moped mugger stuff was happening, and yeah, this sort of did I guess like a viral, and I had sort of radio shows calling me up and things like that. That's it in the metro. But then after that, I sort of realised that the power of this sort of stuff can have, and especially sort of the power of information and just print it out just on a piece of paper, because a lot of this stuff costs it's like about £1 for a meter of it. So like that there, you know what I mean, cost probably about £4 or £5. And this was part of a housing development in Highgate, which they were knocking down the Victorian church that you can see in the background. So I just thought it's just sort of like a poetic picture. But then I started to sort of focus my work more on like sort of I guess it would be like activism or social issues. I'd still try and keep abstract, surreal stuff in there, just to sort of keep people on their toes. But I would always try and keep like an element of humor in there, because I felt that with humor it sort of breaks down barriers, and you know, you can sort of preach ideas at people and keep on trying to stick stuff down people's throats, but they'll just sort of ignore you. But if you can put a joke in front of them, it softens their defenses a little bit, and I think it's a good way to sort of convert people, or to sort of get into people. This is for the Price Waterhouse Cooper building. Sorry if there's any people that work there. Yeah, stuff like this. This is a fake dating app. So then, yeah, I did this one. This was on the Tube in London, and yeah, this did like a mega sort of viral. Like basically went around the world doing stuff, because I think what had happened was, obviously a lot of people in this country knew that it was a sort of a joke against the Conservatives, but then people in America or people in the rest of the world thought it was a typo. So they thought it was a real Conservative Party poster with a typo in it. So then it was just sort of like, haha, look at these stupid Brits. They can't even, you know, like write a political poster. And then this is me on Full Fact. So they had to sort of disprove the misinformation that I'd put out there, which then it sort of come around full circle that, you know, I was trying to basically, I guess, warn people about misinformation and, you know, and stuff like that. I wanted people to question their own reality and question things that had been put in front of them. And then it had sort of come back round onto me that I'd been disproved as being fake. But then, yeah, so it just did, like, because it did a viral, it turned itself into a meme. So it was just getting reproduced on the internet in lots of different sort of forms. And even to this day now, like I'll get sent stuff on either Reddit or Twitter, and it will be doing a viral, and because my name's not on it, I'll never get any recognition for it, but sometimes it just pops up on the internet and will have like hundreds of retweets and stuff. It's quite funny. I feel like it's going to follow me around until I die. So there's another one. Yeah, and then just doing these sort of street interventions where I just sort of just go across stuff that I sort of found offensive with my own sort of advert. This was over an advert for a designer vagina company. So I swapped it around for a ball reduction surgery. I thought it'd be quite funny. Yeah, this is just gibberish. It's like Lorem Ipsum, but I just stuck it up in Birmingham City Centre with some AK-47s on it, just to sort of put a bit of terror in people. Yeah, this was the Primark one just before they opened it. So it was Europe's biggest jumble sale. See through a 20-foot high pile of worthless tat, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of your life. That's on the old Primark when they had moved. Sometimes none of them make any sense. They're just sort of rude and horrible. And there's a funny story about this one actually, because somebody grassed me up to the billboard company, and it was actually the guy that runs the Glee Club. So he runs a comedy club, but he didn't see the funny side of it. Yeah, then just sort of little sort of, this is in McDonald's, just these like little just sort of interventions, just sort of like if you wouldn't sort of see it, you know, if you wasn't looking, sometimes you wouldn't sort of see these things. They're just sort of, they use the same sort of language, the visual language, as what you'd find in there anyway. Yeah, these are light boxes that I'd made, sort of apps. I made them just before lockdown, and I felt like I'd sort of cursed everyone. Yeah, this is on a bus, so these are more sort of. I tried to sort of go away from the black and white posters, because people started to sort of realise when it was a joke or not. So then I started to do stuff in colour and vinyl stickers. This is part of the HS2 line, which is where they found, I think it was like a graveyard. So I thought it'd be funny to stick that, because you can see it off the train. So the train was going past and people send me photos of this. Yeah, this is with an organisation called Brandlism and Ad Block. So this is in Bristol. So it's against SUVs and sort of Jeeps and 4x4s. Yeah, I always try and just sort of keep a sort of social element with the stuff, and I always try and punch up, never punch down. But sometimes I do punch to the side. So this is, yeah, you know, I'll still have a go at people's ideologies. I'm not sort of, I try and have a go at everyone, really. This is for a charity in Leamington Spa that doesn't exist anymore because of COVID. But they asked me to help them develop some adverts to highlight the homelessness of the kids in the city, in the town. This is when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening last year. It was just, I stuck this up because you know, it's coming as like a sort of a white male. Like I felt like I had to sort of tread carefully about what I said. So I just put up what I felt resonated with me. And one of the things, you know, that I put as a comment with this is that I've been doing this now for like over 3 years. A lot of the time I do it in the middle of the daytime, wearing a high vis jacket, and I've never been stopped. And I just questioned, you know, would it be the same if I wasn't a white person? Just to sort of, and it started basically an argument on my Instagram. This was in the middle of lockdown when everyone was feeling a little bit weird and raw. So I stuck this. I've got a key to get in the bus stops. This is part of an installation that I did at Compton Verney. So I did that last summer. So yeah, I found it interesting to sort of try and subvert that environment, these sort of grounds. They're like these beautiful sort of Victorian designed stately home that houses some amazing art, and I put these interventions around the site. Yeah, this was in the middle of lockdown as well. So these are just stickers. That's in Digbeth on near Spotlight, which is a nightclub. This is Angry Arnold Schwarzenegger on 7 Capital boards in Sturchley. So 7 Capital have bought all this land around Sturchley, and they're just basically sitting on it, but it's just created like just sort of like a dead land. So I put like an Angry Arnold Schwarzenegger on it, and it's something that I'm trying to go more into, is sort of these visual jokes. It's sort of stuff that people don't really have to read. It's more immediate. This is a mural that I'd painted in Digbeth, which you can see off the train, and it's just a riff on that idea of the Birmingham screwdriver, which is a hammer. And I just thought I'd put it off the train just to sort of confuse people that were passing through. Yeah, and this is the NHS mural that I painted at the custard factory in the middle of lockdown, just to sort of show love for the NHS and support. This is a piece that I painted in King's Heath. at the time they'd just got their low traffic neighborhood scheme up and running, and it created like a big sort of conflict within the community of people. So I thought it'd be funny to just sort of answer the question with this comfort kills. So that's that one. Yeah, so at the moment, obviously I'm trying to focus more on these sort of visual gags. Yeah, like I said before, that stuff that I didn't really, I don't really have to have people stop and read them and look into it. It's just sort of more of an immediate, like, funny gag. This is putting a sticker of a person on fire on the Galliard Homes mock-up board, so that the advertising hoarding around. So, and then this is another one of people jumping off the buildings, and there's a guy in a hazmat suit, and this is Centenary Square near the Symphony Hall. So yeah, that's the end of that then. Yeah, so I'm done then.
And that's then. I quite like the. So you got a. I've just noticed you got a. Have you got a Christmas Fokker T-shirt?
Yeah, I thought I can't find my balaclava, so I thought I'd just be from there to there.
Cool. Thanks. I mean, I have put a. I have put a message in the speakers chat that's I kind of struggled to stop laughing during that. Have we got any? Okay, there are some questions from the audience. That's got to be the number one question, hasn't it? Is it just high vis and do it during the day and people just trust you?
Yeah, I think it's that thing. It's like that sort of element of authority. If you're wearing like a high vis jacket, I personally go for the coat because it makes me look a bit tougher. But I'd wear a high vis coat, and yeah, I just be, I guess, audacious with it and pretend that you're just doing a crappy job that you don't want to do. And then also in the back of my head, I've got a backup plan, which is if someone says, "What are you doing?" I'll just say, "I'm just going to take a photo of it and then pull it down," because it's not as sort of hardcore as like painting something. It's at the end of the day, it's only paper and water and a bit of glue. So it's all right, really. And yeah, I've had people stop me before, and a lot of the time I tell them, they ask me what I'm doing, and I just will say that I'm putting up anti-graffiti paint, or I've told people before that I'm putting up circus posters and stuff like that. But
I can see the circus posters thing working.
Yeah, that's it.
Is it just, or could you just do the someone else paid me to do this, mate?
Maybe, yeah. There's like, I think whatever situation happens, you can just sort of get out of it. But I think doing stuff in the middle of the day is definitely, like, you definitely look less suspicious. If you go out in the middle of the night and you're hanging around with a bucket and some paper, I think it looks like you're up to something. Or if you just sort of have the confidence and just do it in the middle of the day, I think people don't really question it. They just think someone's there.
What you think? It's quite interesting that. Have we got any? Oh. Was the
Don't Do NO2 poster one of yours? I think so. Yeah, the NOS, the canisters. Yeah, that I think that was me. Yeah. Okay then. So with the political pieces you do, how much backlash do you get from the Birmingham community, or do you find they're supportive and take it in jest? Yeah, I get a lot of support of people, but I'm sort of myself. I'm in sort of like an echo chamber of my own followers and my own Instagram page. So like, you know, like I've put stuff sometimes goes onto like the Birmingham Mail website, and then I'll see what the real opinions of people are then, and a lot of it's just sort of like, get a job, you're lazy and all that.
Just give you a little bit of a. I wouldn't trust the comments section of any newspaper. Yeah. Big representative of what of.
Yeah, I do get a lot of support of people, and I think people, they do like it, and yeah, I wouldn't do it people sort of hated me. Well, I probably would actually.
I think there's kind of a that's a question.
I'm very pally with the printers. I've known them since I've been doing it, so I've known them probably over 10 years. So you know, I used to get sort of quite innocent things printed off them, and then it just started to get more and more weird. But then it was okay then because I was friends with them.
That's a good kind of like, it's a bit of more of a simpler cover up than I thought it would be actually.
Yeah.
Make sure your mates print your stuff for you, and then you're sorted. Have we got any others? Oh God.
Oh, NFTs.
Have you actually looked at NFTs yet?
Yeah, I did actually try to sell one before, and funnily enough, it was a JPEG of the shell one that I just showed you, which said that we're burning the planet, or we're trying to kill the planet. And then lots of people were saying, you know, these things do actually kill the planet, and you know, you shouldn't be doing this. But I was, you know, I've got friends that are into blockchain and things like that, and you know, like I feel like, you know, it's one of the things that could probably democratize the whole world, and at the end of the day, save the world. So like, I'm all behind it. And I've got an NFT that I'm going to probably release in the next couple of weeks.
There's like kind of like there's a bit of there's like a sort of a different levels of that. If you want to see a really funny thread about the music industry and NFT, have a look at what Mint Royale posted on Twitter this morning. Yeah, that was hilarious. We've got three more questions. That's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. I've actually met him. Actually, he's a nice chap. But I would love to. I'd love to collaborate with him.
Yeah, I think it's similar kind of. I don't know. There's similar kind of. There's similar kind of things about what you do, about what both of you do, what Cold War Steve does as well. And also you mentioned like your street art turning into meme art, and Cold War Steve stuff is like total meme art stuff of making things go viral.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know if it's like a Birmingham thing, but it's definitely like, I think it's definitely like, it's like making fun out of bad situations. I think that Brummies are pretty good at that.
Oh, I mean, basically, what Jordan is saying there is like, are you going to sell out?
Either way are. But because my day job before this was, I used to paint murals and stuff for the hospitality industry, and I do office stuff. So, you know, like you know, at the end of the day, like people do need to make money to like fund this stuff. But at the moment, I've got more of a moral standpoint on it because like I make it. My living now comes from selling my artwork, so I can sort of cut them people out. So I've never been approached to do anything like that, and I probably would reject them at the moment until I'm broke again.
That's an honest answer. I like that. The commissions are all looking good now, but then take the money when everyone's sort of broke and
yeah, under a different name. Oh, yeah, I've done that before, definitely. I've just by chance seen people pointing and taking photos, and it makes me really happy. Actually, I really enjoy it. It's sort of I like people looking at the art and laughing and enjoying themselves. It's really wholesome.
I quite like the kind of the secret identity thing where you can just stand there and go, oh yeah, that looks quite cool, and someone's
yeah.
Like tourists are taking photos. That's quite funny. Tourists as well. I mean, there are genuine. In the last 5 years, it's astonishing to me that there are. If you go around the street art in Digbeth, there are, you know, of which your works are part of. There are genuine tourists going around taking photos.
Yeah,
I think them are overseas as well.
Yeah, but I think this is one of the things that one of the problems with Birmingham City Council, or any of the sort of bids and stuff, they need to realise that the potential that this has, because it doesn't cost much to give street artists money to paint murals, and you're creating something that will generate stuff at the end of it. And I feel like it's an important thing that we could do. I think I don't know if it was Montreal, and they were charging advertisers 5%. A 5% tax, and they're putting that 5% into street art, and now Montreal is like street art capital of like North America. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not rocket science, and if there's anyone here from the council, sort it out. There's loads of great artists here.
I think it's really sort of like, I don't know, but with Digbeth, it feels like that the artists have had to drive it themselves in order for the council to even notice. And then when the Guardians start doing articles going, you want to probably go here because the street art's amazing, suddenly the council go, well, maybe we should allow this. And you think, bonkers. There's a couple of questions, because we've got like a couple of minutes left. So as a bit of a it's I mean, I've never had the opportunity to, I don't know how you regard yourself, but I would say now a street artist. So I haven't had the opportunity to directly ask a question to one before. For my background, I'm like a street art nerd, mostly around sort of the early Wild Bunch and 3D and Massive Attack kind of stuff, and then the early London stuff before he who shall not be named. There's no point dropping his name in. So especially his Massive Attack in Bristol as well. So what I want to know is, how do you pick a site, and not just in Birmingham when you pick sites in London, but when you decide to go regional, do you get tip-offs, or do you get how does that work?
When I do it here, usually just driving around, I'll see spots that I feel like if I can see this from the car, or I can see this from the bus, everyone will be able to see it. With stuff, when I go to London and things like that, I'll just sort of mill around and walk around a bit, and because I can sort of take my time with the posters, and sometimes I'll take multiples as well. So I'll take a few down and then just see what works best. But I just feel like, a lot of the time, especially around London, it's so easy to pick spots, because there's just so many people walking past everywhere, that it's sort of like you'll always get a good spot.
So questions pop up. Do your family know what you do? Does your family know what you do?
No, they think I work in sales.
So some of the art community know who you are, but the main thing is that you don't have to deal with the politics at the family table. So do you post stuff for do you post stuff apart from the sort of comedy value? Do you post stuff knowing that a particular gag in a particular location? Well, I say a gag, it makes you think more. Do you pick trying to get reactions in order to get stuff to go viral, or is it just or is it more things that you feel personally sort of passionate about?
Yeah, I think sometimes it just sort of blends in the middle. So sometimes, a lot of the time, what will happen is I'll see something like an advert that sort of pisses me off a bit, and I'm like, that's annoyed me, and then I'll try and turn it back in on itself. But then obviously stuff like when the Primark store had opened, it's just sort of prime. It's just like a prime time to do something.
An easier target.
Yeah, that's it. And it's sort of like you can sort of go on their coattails a little bit with something that's going on, but trying to figure out or keep an interest in when that stuff's going to happen is sort of beyond me. So I just sort of let it fall on my lap rather than try and actively look for them.
Okay, so instinctive. And finally, the last question, which has got to be the one that I don't know if anyone else hasn't asked it, is: have West Midlands Police or anybody that's been a private landowner been interested in pressing charges or got that annoyed with you?
No, well, this is the thing. No, So I mean, this is
that means we need more street artists then, surely.
Yeah, probably not. But I was doing because I did something with West Midlands Police. I left a box outside their police station that said that there was a robot in it, like a police robot. And I thought that they would hate me for it, but somebody messaged me from West Midlands Police from the Digbeth and was like, "Yeah, we love your stuff, and like keep on doing it and stuff." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird." But I guess it's because it's like they're just posters, aren't they? And it's just paper. I think it doesn't and because it's got the joke on it as well. I feel like it's just a bit innocent. You can't really get mad.
I mean, that's really personally to me, that's really interesting, especially considering what's going on with the Met Police, like who've not had the best couple of weeks. Let's put it that way. But then when it comes to sort of street art like this, they just sort of shrug their shoulders.
Yeah. I get a lot of trouble off Travel West Midlands. Always, why are you sticking stuff on the buses? Someone's got to clean that off the bus and all this. I always just ignore them there.
Did you start replying by saying, well, I think I know that?
Yeah.
Someone's going to clean this off. Yeah. But the point is that I wanted a lot of people to see it.
Yeah.
TFL not moaned about anything?
No. I think like they love stuff as well. I think they like they like publicity. Some especially comms teams and things like that. They love publicity. Even if it's bad.
That's quite. That is really interesting. Because I thought TFL would be like a sort of a big baddie type thing, and the fact that they're like, well, but if it's generating a load of publicity for the Tube, the Tube needs is obviously struggling for a bit of cash and needs a bit of socials. They're like, okay, we'll let this pass. God, that's really weird and quite insightful.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, thank you very much. That's been really interesting. If you want to check out more of Fuckable stuff, go to Megacorp Global. Is it .com? I think.
Yeah, .com. Yeah.
And then there's still some stuff that hasn't sold out. That's quite cool. Like some of the light boxes are available, I think, or
yeah.
And there's only, I think the McDonald's one you've shown like is still available as well. I can't remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, go and look at that stuff. And you've also you have introduced some new stuff, and I can't wait for you to ask the BBC producers if you can use printings of Pat Butcher for your latest collection. Which I thoroughly enjoyed. I enjoyed Ainsley more because it was more bizarre, but
yeah.
Thanks for Pat Butcher. So thank you very much. Fokker Wolf. So last and by very much not least, we have our final speaker of the evening. I've got to say that Casey is going to be we're a multidisciplined event, right? That was the sort of the whole point of it. Casey seems to be, in terms of a great fit, probably one of the most multidisciplined people I think I've seen in the region by miles. We did the obvious thing in our tweets and everything and said, okay, it's the Birmingham Poet Laureate. I didn't actually know there was a Birmingham Poet Laureate, so it was like a sort of a Today I Learned type thing. And if you look at the history of both the Poet Laureates here, they're obviously sort of like big names. So in Casey's the current one, but when you look at what he does, he's far more than that. So as an educator, he's an assistant head teacher where he specialises in behavior, in behavior and inclusion, leveling up on sort of social and cultural levels of leveling up pupils, safeguarding, and he's got an array of qualifications from University of Worcester, I think an honorary degree from the University of Worcester, but also Birmingham City University, and also a degree from both. He's doing a master's at the moment, I think, or just completed. I think I'm sure he'll correct me in a minute. with the poetry that he does, also he's had a string of singles and an EP. Obviously, like the sort of the underground community of in Birmingham is kind of like again is like a Brum Tech Tapas thing, but it's not spoken about too much. I mean, yeah, we've got superstars like Lady Lucia and JK and people like that, but really sort of under the surface, there's a lot of names and events and cool stuff going on. So naturally, Casey's got an EP that sort of goes hand in hand with that, with the poetry that he does. So he's just had his second collection of poetry published on Burning Eye Books, which is titled "Please Do Not Touch." So we're going to hear some excerpts and then do a Q&A afterwards. Everybody, for our last speaker of the evening, please welcome Casey Bailey.
Hey guys, I hope you can all see me. I'm sharing my screen, so I don't know what you can see, if that makes any sense.
You can all see, mate.
Cool. Thank you for the intro. That was big. Okay, so my next collection, my second collection of poetry, as James said, will be published really soon with Burning Eye Books. It will be published on the 3rd of June. And what I'm going to try to do, it's a rare opportunity really to have this kind of time to go through something, talk about it, share some of the poems. So I'm going to kind of talk you through the process, how I got to the book as it is now, and yeah, then hopefully answer some questions. So I'm probably going to share some poetry and some information for about 20-25 minutes. So cool. So the book is called Please Do Not Touch. And what you can see on the left side of my slide is the front cover. The front cover was designed by my wife, and the handprint is my son's handprint. And I just think that's cool. That's why I told you that. The concept for the book started in going around like museums, National Trust houses. You often see these signs saying, "Please do not touch." And almost always where you see these things, they're on items that have been taken from somewhere else in the world. So you've got something that if it was never touched in the first place would never have made it to this museum or this National Trust house or this English heritage site. And for me, I found that like very hypocritical, and I went down this little wormhole in my head, and I focused specifically on the National Trust for a long time. Just looking at this kind of hypocrisy and how a lot of the wealth that we see, whether it's the wealth that's displayed from times gone by or even the wealth in modern society, is like somehow come from, whether it's the slave trade, colonialism, all different kind of like dodgy means, as I will put it. And so thankfully, when I put the book together and I put the concept together, I submitted it to Burning Eye Books, and they said they will publish it. I'm very proud of that. It's a great publishing house, and here we go. So the first poem in the book is called The Ruin. And if you've ever been to Shugborough Estate, you probably would have seen The Ruin. It's a National Trust house, and The Ruin is this monument in the garden, and this poem is about the ruin. The monument in the garden isn't falling down. It was built like that. The architect admired the aesthetic of ancient Athens, dilapidated statues leaning like old men on canes before hip replacements. Struggle and pain are so romantic and sexy to those who have never known them. In a world where the Rottweilers gnaw off their own tails to wag their stumps for sympathy and rhinoceroses shed their horns for attention, the ruin fits. With the sunlight splintering off the river, giving light back to a structure that only throws shade, and dragonflies jiving across its dance floor, it is wondrous and elegant and magical, and I wish I never knew its story. Cool, thank you. So, yeah, the ruin was made like that. It was made to look like a ruin, which is very weird. Anyway, so Shugborough Estate is, or was, the home to the Anson brothers, Thomas Anson and George Anson. And during writing this book, I did lots of research on different houses, different people. And the Ansons are two that I found very interesting, particularly George Anson, because George Anson kind of epitomizes what was going on in my head when I was writing this book. Because George Anson was like a naval captain who sailed around the world, taking people's stuff. If he wasn't British, they would call him a pirate. But because he's British, he's a naval captain, he gets to bring all this money home. He gets to hold up boats and take their stuff and bring them home, and he becomes a hero. And there's an irony in the fact that today we have people who are rich because their ancestors were people like the Ansons who judge people who go out and steal and take to become rich. And I wonder if they know where their wealth comes from. And I think the epitome of this is there's a book that I wanted to read, which was written by George Anson. It was his notes of his travels around the world. And when I bought this book, this is how it looked inside. It's all like photocopied pages. And that like was the best metaphor for the whole thing, because I'd been ripped off and his work had been photocopied. So his brother Thomas Anson, when he died, changed the whole estate because he wanted a specific look and he had to use his brother's money to make it. This poem is called When Your Brother Died. You spent his fortune on your dreams, built your grand estate on the back of his stolen wealth like it was yours, like it was his. He would have loved it. Grecian taste, oriental magnificence, how to dress opportunistic betrayal so that it may strut. How graceful can greed be? Who taught you to take so well? Which marauder unlocked your potential to unlock, relock, annex, asseverate, own? Did he know? Had he seen boomerangs before? When he threw you, could he foresee your future as vulture, his future as carrion? How proud he would be. Cool. So that's enough about the Ansons. We'll get rid of them. One of the things that I noticed that almost every National Trust house that I visited was the library. The libraries are magnificent. There's something special. You can see down in the corner there, the please do not touch sign in the library. And there are books in National Trust libraries that are available nowhere else in the world, and you're not allowed to touch them, which kind of epitomizes, I'm using the word epitomizes a lot, kind of highlights the issue that we have. And this next poem that I wrote called Library came from different notes around the libraries. One of them is on the screen now, and how they spoke about what the library was. And for me, the library and the knowledge that it contained became a platform to keep these people above everybody else because they had the information that nobody else had. Library. This room is book lovers, is a testament, is two generations. This room is additional shelf space. This room where children read politics by the fireplace, these politics that place children by fires. This room, coated now in dust or ash. We discover how weeds became flowers, how light became controlled. This room is a doorway. This room is a boundary. This room is a foundation. This room has no ceiling. And one of the things that I think we've seen it a lot in the news recently. I started writing this project maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. We've seen a lot in the news recently around people being unaware of empire and people not knowing what happened in the empire and what our history is and even what our present is in some cases. And I went to a National Trust house and they had the ceiling art that looks like it's moving when you walk past it. And I read that this is called trompe-l'oeil. And this is a French word, and it's about the art of illusion. It's the literal meaning is trick the eye. And this like stuck with me because in many ways, the way this stuff is presented represents the art of illusion. And there's a picture at Charlotte of, I can't remember the man's name, Mr. Lucas, James Lucas maybe. And you might not be able to see it on this screen, but there is a black boy holding the horse. And the black boy has got a metal collar around his neck. And there was uproar because in the documentation at the house, the black boy was described as a page boy. And I think we all know what the black boy actually was. And this poem is called Trompe-l'oeil. The black boy with the metal collar is a page boy, chained like the horse he holds. A black beauty, a beast braced by the man he serves. Out of frame, there is champagne pissing from the heavens, intoxicating. The statue lions have been roaring into the vacuum. animated in protestation. And here, in this corridor between actuality and invention, the black boy in the collar is a page boy. Cool. So on my journey to writing this book, things changed for me. So at first I was researching, I was reading about the Anson's history, I was reading about some of the atrocities of colonialism, how viceroys worked, how things were taken and never put back. And actually, sorry, I'll go back a slide. How things were taken. This image on the right-hand side is an Afro comb taken from Somalia. And they believe that the comb was carved from one piece of wood. And the person who took the comb was most likely someone whose hair was so straight naturally that they never needed that comb. And it always stuck with me that you imagine on the day you wake up, women have been raped, men have been murdered, all of your things have been taken by this external force. And it's something that kind of jarred in my head, like I couldn't even comb my hair because they even took the combs. And that bogged me in a way that probably something that seems so insignificant shouldn't bog me. But I went from research and I went into interest and I went into enjoyment. I started to enjoy these spaces, and I will talk about why in a second. But one of the things that I researched that I really wanted to see was the Old Man of Cork, which is a tree that you can see next to you. And it's one of the oldest trees in the country. And I wrote this poem, and normally I don't talk about what this poem's about, and people never know what it's about. But the poem was inspired by the Old Man of Cork, and it's called The Old Man. The old man has seen things that we haven't. His scruffy coat doesn't do his grandeur justice. Old and nobbled, I'd imagine that he hobbled here, weighed down and wearied by the knowledge that so many who were born beneath him are now gone. Those who provided shade at his birth are barely even memories. He is not the last man standing. But what is company when your past is the longest and your future the strongest? How do you sit at lunchtime when you've eaten the ancestors of your peers and written recipes for their unborn children? He is not old like your bedbound nana. He is old like royal palaces, surrounded by tower blocks who have youth but little more. There is no point in learning his story to share his legacy. When you are gone, he will tell it for himself. You will not feature. The old man has seen things that we haven't. He will see things that we will not. Cool. So as I say, I went from research, some of the poems you've already heard, to interest, poems like The Old Man of Cork. And then I went into enjoyment, and there was a very specific reason for my enjoyment. I was taking my son, Xander, the young superstar that you can see there, to National Trust houses. I was taking him onto greenery that I would never have been on at his age. I was taking him to see things that I would never have seen at his age. And his excitement and his enthusiasm and his passion was infectious. And I became able to enjoy these spaces for what they are right now, as well as consider them for what they represent. And one day we were at National Trust, and Xander had some soup, and this poem came from that. It's called Soup. Today you ate soup like it was your first meal that you had eaten in days. You had half a cheese sandwich for lunch at 1:30. There is soup on the table and bread in your hair. You look like Mowgli from the Jungle Book if Mowgli had eaten soup. And you smile as the yogurt is placed in front of you. You look at yogurt how I looked at your mother the day I met her. How I looked at your mother at 4 o'clock this morning as she sighed in her sleep, dreaming of you and your ways. You look at yogurt how I looked at your mother when I found her in the art room at college, painting. Her paintbrush darting like sparrows on autumn mornings, leaving crimsons and caramels in their wake. I knew then that she would spend her life both being and making beauty. She feeds you yogurt. I take the wipes out. There is soup all over the floor. So, what does it mean to write these poems. And this was a point in me putting together these poems where I thought I was finished. And I sent them to a few people, one of them being my dad, who is not a poet, but is a wise man. And people said to me, what does it mean? We get that this has happened, but what does it mean? And I realized that what I hadn't touched on is what the day-to-day experience is of people whose lives have been infected by what has happened. And so I started writing about how I grew up, where I grew up, and what that looks like. And I wrote these two poems. The first poem is called Every Boy Who Dies in the Ghetto Is Me. And I wrote this poem after a boy who I was mentoring kind of broke down and cried after another young boy in the area died, and asked him if he knew him. And he said, no, but it could have been me. His parents could be my parents. And this poem is called Every Boy Who Dies in the Ghetto Is Me. Maybe I was too young. They say your life flashes before your eyes. Maybe I haven't seen enough life. The only light I saw came with a bang attached. The only thing I saw was death, grinning like a schoolboy who takes money at lunchtime, snatching before speaking, without care. There wasn't rain on the day I fell. The street could not clean itself. A woman who looks like my mother had to clean the blood. She saw her son turn from smiles to spray, to stains, to suds, to silence. She saw her boy, barely born, buried before she saw him live. Cool. And after I wrote that poem, I realized that equally, all of the boys in the ghetto could be on the other side of that. And so I wrote this poem, Every Boy Who Kills in the Ghetto Is Me. I am no Richter scale. I know nothing of earthquakes, but I can explain how the hand shakes as the trigger squeeze reaches pause point. I could describe how both hands vibrate the morning after a boy drops in the wake of their treachery. I have killed myself and live to tell the story. Is it still suicide if the you that dies carries a different heart, answers to another name, grew on another block? When your dad says sorry to his in the courtroom, is it sorry your son died, or sorry mine didn't? And in the midst of writing these poems, I played around with form in many different ways. And one of them was I wrote this poem. It's called a concrete poem, which means the poem holds some kind of shape. The poem is all about time. The poem is written in the shape of an hourglass, and it's about someone that I lost. It's called Suspended. The light in the hospital toilet flickers. The fragile beat of a heart during surgery. We remind each other how strong you are, trying to siphon that strength to restrain the furious estuaries of our eyelids. I switch tactics from rapid blinking to calm, solid eye contact, knowing that showing my weakness would be accepting yours. I can't betray you. The word in the air stinks of blood, taste of death. They will tell us that you're gone. They never say dead. It doesn't change the fact. It will not change the light bulb in the light. It just flickers until it can't. We stand in darkness telling each other that you have traveled to the luminescence that you deserve. At your funeral, I'll hold my sister in my arms. Let the tsunami break my eyelids like you broke my faith. There's no strength in denial now. They'll tell me time will heal. I know now that we all run out of time. And very quickly, very, very quickly, I'm going to do two more poems. In the midst of writing this collection, I spoke to my dad a few times about different things. And one of them was about the way in Afro-Caribbean tradition and many other traditions, parents tend to hit their children. And we spoke about the historical context of that, where people were kept as slaves, and the way that they were disciplined was through beating, and it wasn't many generations ago. And my dad said more than that. People hit their children because They're scared that their children will end up having to find out the consequences of their actions somewhere else. So they are harsh, very harsh on them in the house. And there's a saying that you may know, spare the rod, spoil the child. And this poem is called No Rod Spared. When you pause to wipe the sweat from your brow, your son will inhale the oceans and release Surrey on its waves. When the tide washes over you, you will hold for a moment. As his winks break, cheeks fall, and tension leaves his shoulder, you will strike with more potency. Blood will run from the fault lines across a forearm thrown in defense. He will look from behind the shield of the hate for the hatred that he knows must live in your eyes. His gaze will fall on fear and trepidation. You walk him to this depth, let his lung hold water only to keep him from drowning at the hands of another. Cool, so my last poem, something that I need to thank, there's a poet called Caleb Femi. If you don't know who Caleb Femi is, please take him in, I'll talk about him again in a second. Something that I took from Caleb Femi's collection, Poor, which is about growing up in Southeast London, in Peckham, which is about just life in a kind of ghetto environment. Something that I took from it, which was really important and started to shape some of the stuff I did in this collection, was there's joy in his collection, and there's joy in his collection because there's joy in the ends. There's joy growing up in inner city Birmingham. And the last poem I want to share and what I want to leave this on is this poem called Two Swings. And this poem is about love in the ends. And they will not hold hands. Instead, they will let little fingers hang, intertwined. In this bond, they will keep the time. He said, I don't know, man. You're special. And the time she said, yeah, maybe not all boys, just most. Between this finger link and his black Air Max 95s brushing along the side of her white Air Force Ones, they will hold a phenomenon that will break every rule of this place. They will wrap it warmly in black tracksuits, dip it in honey, coat it in Demerara sugar, and rock it back and forward on these swings under midnight sky. Cool. So the collection is called Please Do Not Touch. Caleb Femi, who I'm kind of wowed that he said this about it because he's one of the best poets working right now, in my opinion, said this is a beautifully shattering collection, how delicately unstitches small and personal disasters on the page, how Casey flattens Birmingham and soaks our hands into its soil so we can feel its warmth, its grit, and the seeds that may still germinate one day. Thank you, Caleb Femi. That is extremely generous. And that is me done reading you poems. So hopefully I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Cool.
Here we go. Thank you very much, Casey. That had me kind of a bit sort of spellbound and all over the place. I don't know at the moment if we've got any questions from the audience. There we go.
So for this collection in particular, that was really hard. First of all, I chopped a lot of poems from the collection that I'd originally wanted to publish, so it was quite a lot longer than it currently is. So that was the first kind of thing. And then I wanted it to work in sections, kind of sections around the kind of history, select sections around the present. But when I spoke to the publisher was like, it feels like overly dense in the historical time. It feels like almost too depressing. And I have a reputation of being the happiest poet with the most depressing poems. But the publisher was like, oh, still a bit. So with this one, I wanted there to be like I specifically went for like a chop and change of energies. And so I just kind of pieced them together and read them. I read the whole collection out loud loads of times, videoed it to myself, moving poems around to see how they felt like they traveled. And when I felt like I got the right order, it stuck. Good question. That was tough.
Cool.
So So there's a saying definitely about collections, not so much about poems, but I'll come back to the poems, that people have said to me loads about poetry collections is it's never finished. You just stop working on it. Like you accept it's at the level that it's going to be at. And I think with poetry,
music, like that kind of music thing where a track is only finished when you say, I'm not going to work on it anymore.
Exactly, yeah. And you could always add another instrument. You could always put a little bit more backing vocals in. You could always strip something back. And I think, most good poems that I've read and good poems that I've heard, the person's probably edited it 5 times, and I would have thought every one of those edits was great. And so you get the finished one, and they probably think, oh, I could have edited that again. So it is impossible to say when a poem is finished. All you can say is, I'm not doing anything with the poem anymore. That's what you can say. Yeah, so that is the plan. I think that there's a real kind of balance for me personally. I can't speak for anyone else. There's a real balance in poetry of having enough kind of abstract and metaphor and not too literal, while still keeping it attached to the point. And that's the idea. Yeah. So I want people to feel like they can see what's unfolding, and it's easier when it's spoken. It's even harder again when you do it on the page. But that's the plan. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And if I read it and I don't think it makes sense, like to somebody other than me, that's what I'll go back and kind of look at. I wouldn't say my direct research of the empire has fed back into my work. My understanding of racism in our society has definitely fed into how I engage with everything in my life, absolutely everything, and that includes how I work with young people and how I work with teachers, how I work with staff. So yeah, I'd say my overall holistic understanding of racism and its roots has definitely impacted the way in which I work. That's a good question. So I know a lot of poets who kind of they have the kind of standpoint and the viewpoint that if people don't get it, it doesn't matter. And I think everyone will get slightly different things from poems. My personal opinion, there's a poet called Gil Scott-Heron. Gil Scott-Heron, absolutely legendary poet, who
the inventor of hip hop.
Right, and Gil Scott-Heron is the person who invented the phrase "the revolution will not be televised."
Yeah.
And Gil Scott-Heron said that there's a thing that we do as poets where we kind of feel like it's not a poem if there aren't certain things that people don't understand, and he doesn't get that. And so we try to be too deep in poems, and he said we don't need poets to make things more complex. To me, I would like if everybody understands a poem, but at the same time, I'm not going to write it in such a way that there is therefore no poetics in it. So I'm kind of going for that balance of there's enough poetic kind of expression without it being like so abstract that you actually don't know what the thing's about. So yeah, that's really important balance for me.
There you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely will. To put it simply.
that was an easy one.
I will sign it for you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. This is a good question.
Do you find that feathers get ruffled when you write about sensitive historic? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason for that is, it goes back to one of the things I said. And there's 2 poems in the book. They're called Same Energy, and they look just like each other, and they sit on opposite pages, and they explore the way that we discuss criminals in the modern day, and we have heroes of the past who did the same thing. And I think that there's something difficult about knowing that how we live was built on negativity or built on criminality or things that weren't criminal at the time but probably should have been, in that we have to explore our own position. We have to look at, am I where I am because of certain things that happened in the past? And people don't want to look at themselves in that way because we all want to think that I just did great and that's where I am. Unless people are struggling, then people will look back and say, well, this never happened.
I think it's interesting because Fokker Wolf really sort of touched on that earlier by with the white privilege duff coat. My consciousness is right now we're not to get sort of massively political, but we're now in a phase where we're talking about printing out more flags and making sure the British flag is present everywhere, which seems like a balmy kind of thing to be doing, but really ties in with your poetry about empire.
There's a poem in the collection called Viceroy, and just very briefly, the Viceroy was like the person who British people sent to a country to rule that country on behalf of the king or queen. And we talk about like trade relationships with India have come up quite a lot in the midst of Brexit. But the way our trade relationship worked with India is we put a British person in charge and we bought all their stuff really cheaply off them because we were selling it to ourselves. And now in the present day, we go, we could have a fantastic trade relationship like we did with India before. The equivalent of our trade relationship with India is like me sending my brother to your house. He takes over your house and sells me your PS5 for £5. Like, it's not a brilliant trade relationship.
Funny enough, they're not so interested in 2021.
And I read that poem in India, and even in India, I did a reading in India in January 2020, and people are like, we never thought about that. Like we've just accepted that this is what happened, and this was great, and that was like mind blowing for me.
That's fascinating. Cool. And the last one. Oh yes.
There is a poetry event that should happen quarterly. That's run by a guy called Casey Bailey, called Ramblers Ball. That is not the best poetry night in Birmingham, though. There is Hit the Ode. Sturchley Speaks, if you're in Sturchley Way. Hit the Ode is central Birmingham, based at the Hippodrome now, run by Apples and Snakes. There's Sturchley Speaks, which is, I don't know what the cafe is called now. I think it's called Abstract in Sturchley. There is Poetry Jam, run by Beat Freaks. There's loads and loads and loads. Reach out to someone at Apples and Snakes. They won't thank me for saying that because they'll get bombarded. And they kind of know what's happening and what's going on.
Cool. Yeah. Specifically, Beat Freaks are on the sort of the radar of Brum Tech Tapas. So we've got a couple of recommendations by their CEO of young people that want to speak. I'm not sure what content it is, whether it's poetry or not, but it might well be. But they're people that we're really interested in kind of hosting and pushing the work that they do. So thank you for the final speaker of the evening. Thanks, Casey. That was absolutely awesome. So I guess it's just up to me to wrap up now. Thank you everybody for listening. If indeed everyone is still here, it's so great to actually see some people, to see plenty of people still interesting. That was an absolutely phenomenal lineup of speakers beforehand, and then afterwards I've just come out of that absolutely loving what they did. That was really, really great. Some important, really the last slide before I say goodnight is really it's important to obviously say thanks. First of all, our thanks to the speakers who did a fantastic job. The second thanks are obviously to the audience. Thank you very much for attending. I know that we're coming towards the end of lockdown right now, and attending virtual events, especially a long one like this, is a big ask. And thank you to all the audience members that submitted questions as well. It's really important to keep the kind of dialogue going and to keep the speakers interested and to keep our audience happy. So the next point really is so this is the first event. We're gonna run this quarterly. We do have a penciled in date for the next one. We don't know if it's going to be virtual or whether it's going to be in person. If it's in person, obviously no, it's going to be in the Hindhouse. So yeah, we're on June the 24th for that. We already have our first speaker booked in for that, who is Jez Collins, who runs the Birmingham Music Archive, and he's going to be doing I think he's going to be doing a talk about the Q Club, the musical heritage of the Q Club. As you can see from the slide that I've got here, the other things are the top two names there are the people that really sort of that spearheaded the whole thing. Cryogenics being Stuart Langridge, who in the Birmingham tech community and dabbles a lot and has his hands in the pies. And quite importantly, Maeve O'Sullivan, OS Comms, who has helped us with publicity massively, has helped us drive this and to get it to audiences so that people know this is happening. That has been absolutely awesome. And then another big thing, thanks to my team at Fusion, who get the word out and support what we do. Birmingham Tech and Yanis, who are really, really supportive and got us on the news wire and got the word out. And to Naomi Watts, I don't know if I've got her surname wrong. That's before Nash. There we go. That's your married name. So Naomi Nash at Tech Nation, who has really sort of helped to get the word out. I mentioned to Casey about Beat Freaks, and she and Naomi got us onto Beat Freaks, and like, you should speak to these people. So all these people really help like make the event, but really the event is made by, apart from our speakers, is made by the audience. So if you like what you saw, get the word out. It would be great to obviously have more people. And by the time that we get to doing this physically, if there's more people in person, that would be absolutely awesome, to have like a full audience. And also speakers. We have absolutely no preconceptions about what a speaker should be like for Brum Tech Tapas, unless all they need is a story, and that, you know, if it's something that's interesting, that they're doing community work or they're doing work on the ground about something that is interesting, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about how big or whether they've spoken before or anything. Put them forward. Go to our website. You can send an email to us. You can fill out a form and just say, are you interested in speaking? Get the word around, because that's really what this is that's what this is all about. This is what this is kind of for. We are working on our site to get a bit more. To get a bit more of a feedback kind of loop, but feedback is really, really important. So if you've got any feedback, Twitter is going to be the obvious one. We haven't set up Insta just yet, but we will do. Send us a DM or send us an email on our site, or let us know, or let me know personally. I'm Sakon J at Twitter, if you want to hit me up. So yeah, I guess. I guess really it's left to just say thank you, everyone. It's absolutely amazing for our speakers and our audience, and that was an absolute pleasure to host. Thank you and good night.